Welcome back to the channel. This is the Casuals. I'm Jin.
And I'm Saki.
In today's episode, not anime, but today's episode is another anime review. And so we're gonna continue off. This is gonna be like a consecutive episode, leaving off on the previous episode, talking about World Trigger. This should be the last episode just because we can go on for like 5 episodes straight if we went through every little detail. So we're not gonna go through every little detail. We're gonna speed things up kind of bit. So right away we're gonna go into where we last left off, which was when Osamu, the main character, had like on at the end of the first day is talking with Yuma Kuga, and Yuma just or Kuga rather that departs his words of wisdom with what he got from his dad. And so what's let's see, I guess we should talk about like the rest of the squad, like the squad that eventually comes. So in order to speed things up, or like get things up to date, we're gonna talk about like Osamu eventually decides that through twists and turns and through the help of Yuichi Jin, Jin being another major character, or I guess major side character rather. There is certainly a main character, which is Osamu, but they don't really focus on him all the time. There's a lot of presence of others. It's rich in presence with a lot of side characters, which is another thing I particularly enjoy about World Trigger, is that there's a lot of side characters that are like clear and distinct in like their identities and personalities. And so, what about you? What do you think about like the tons of side characters that ended up appearing in the story?
I particularly enjoyed it because it's more interesting with more characters. At least there's not like so many that they can't focus, on like each character as much. But I think they handled it pretty well. Like you kind of get a little bit of background for each character. You kind of get the vibes of like how they became to be in the story and all that. And like I guess we'll talk about like ranking later, maybe about like
Yeah.
how they got there. I think they covered it pretty well.
I think it's also because the author had made each squad or each side character show up for a reason. They weren't just there unnecessarily. They just didn't exist in the story. Like they didn't pop out just to pop out. They were there because usually each person had like not like a, how do you say it? It's not like a game objective or anything, but like they had a reason to be there. They were doing something, or they had an objective in that area, or they had an objective with the person involved with them. So that's why they showed up, which was refreshing to see instead of someone mindlessly being there.
Yeah, at least for like the characters they talk about, yeah, like you said, they all had a purpose or have a purpose, so it's not just like a bunch of random stuff being thrown in and overloading you.
Yeah. And so, through twists and turns, they end up enlisting the help of Yuichi Jin, who ends up helping them out later on, especially for Kuga. And so, Kuga was rejected by Border initially just because he was a neighbor, and they were like, nah, he can't be existing or something like that, even though his father has close ties. It turns out, I'm gonna glance over this really quickly. It turns out his father actually had very close connections with the beginnings of Border. He basically started the organization with them, and that's his father. So like Kuga is technically special because he's the son of that father who helped eventually practically save quote unquote humanity in that case. But the commands, upper commands, only 3 of them out of the like 7 people in the top position knew about Kuga's father. And the father's name is Kuga Yugo, by the way, Yugo Kuga. But 2 of them were heavily opposed by it. One of them was neutral, and because of like there's like this whole political thing that goes on in the border, which is interesting if you think about it, because there's also power balances inside the border itself. It's not like just a one cohesive unit. There's actual like how do you say this? almost governmental like branches, right? And bureaucracy inside the inside the organization, which was interesting. It was new, right? It's not just like a united one for all type thing. And so, how do I say this? Because of that conflict, one of the higher ups ordered basically that Kuga's trigger, and we have to talk about triggers too, must be retrieved. And so what triggers are is basically kind of like your, how do you say this? Your all-round tool. It exchanges your physical body for, I guess, a virtual body made out of material or supply called Treon. And what Treon is like a kind of like a energy type thing that exists within each body, and the amount existing inside a human body, or in this case a human body, or really any body, depends on, just by chance. Someone could have massive amounts of Treon, others could have tiny amounts of Treon. Some could have, standard amount of Treon, or whatever the standard is. And so it varies wildly, and the amount of Treon also gives you the ability to do things. Just the amount of Treon that you have gives you determines the amount of things that you're able to do. The lower you have, the less you're able to do. The more you have, the more flexibility you have, and the more firepower you have. And so, higher up in border ordered that the trigger must be taken away, because Kuga's trigger is particularly special, and it was the black trigger. And you saw the black trigger in action for the first time. What did you think about it when you first saw it in action?
My first thoughts were black triggers were like extremely overpowered compared to normal triggers. I think I forget exactly what his black trigger was. It was like a bunch of different, like, I don't know.
It was a bunch of different abilities, at least to say. There was no clear identity to it, other than I guess one clear identity is that it's able to copy other abilities.
Right. So yeah, his I thought was, I thought it was cool. It's different, because mostly everyone else has, a normal trigger, but his was the black trigger, and I was like, oh, that's cool. But what also was interesting was I thought it was like only one person can have it kind of thing, but I didn't realize multiple people. It explains later, but that there's multiple black triggers, and I was like, oh man, what if, in my head I'm just thinking, what if they all like went in a fight against each other? Like, that would be pretty cool.
Yeah, it's something that has never happened in the story. Black trigger versus black trigger, as far in terms of like within border, like within border, and really, again, like in general, there's never been a black trigger versus black trigger fight. And so it's kind of interesting that multiple black trigger users exist, and it's not like they're like they are considered supremely powerful, right, within that universe. But in our point of view, I think like even we recognize that it's not supremely powerful. It's because one, black triggers are kind of like, how do you say this, specialized weapons, tools. And so not just anyone can make use of it and become immediately overpowered, right? If they don't have the knowledge to utilize it, it becomes worthless. And two, black triggers are only suited for certain types of people. It doesn't just like, it's not like a one for all type thing. Like, anyone can pick it up and use it all of a sudden. It will only activate if it deems compatible with the user. And so, going along with the story, it turns out that Kuga's being targeted, and they basically manage to stall for time, and Jin comes in and negotiates with the border organization, and it turns out that Jin is a black trigger user. Which is incredible, because he was one of the guys that you least expected at the beginning. That is, you just saw him as like a kind of like a upbeat, not a care in the world type guy, I think, right?
Yeah, that was my first impressions of him. So when they explained that he was a black trigger user, I was like, no, it can't be. Like, he's too kind of like, his personality's like laid back, but he's serious laid back. And so I was like, when when they said he was a user, I was like, really, that guy? Like out of everyone, it was that guy.
And it's because the way they explain Black Trigger users is that the way Black Trigger users even happen is that um so if you watch the story or in the beginning of the story, when you watch you know through the anime or even read the manga, you notice that like you start noticing things like why has the neighbors not launched a full-out invasion to the point where it overwhelms, the people of Earth, right? Or like in this particular instance, Mikadoshi City, right? Why they're sending them in super small batches, right? It doesn't make sense. Like even in like, no matter how you think about it logistically in any way or form, it can't be like, why would you send so little bit at a time, right? It doesn't make any sense. It's revealed that like each of these like giant ass creatures are not creatures itself. They're not like really like, how do you say, sentient beings. They're weapons. They're like automated weapons. And so it's like clearly it takes resources to make them, right? And clearly like not much can be sent at once unless like something special is happening. And so why on earth are they wasting resources to,
So you're saying it's like sending, like for just, I guess, normal Earth reasons, it's like sending in some tanks. You need production.
Yeah.
So you can't just send in like 1,000 at once. You gotta make them. So sometimes you'll send in like a wave of like 50 or something.
Yeah, but in this case, they were sending a wave of 1, which doesn't make really any sense, right? You're sending 1 to a large battlefield or something like that, right? A hostile zone filled with people who have like RPGs and stuff. It doesn't make any sense. So it turns out like it's revealed that Black Triggers happen because it's created by users of like trigger users who give up everything, literally every ounce of Trigon they have and their life force pouring into the trigger, and it transforms into a Black Trigger. And so it's been said before that Black Triggers are the reason why wars, like the tide of wars, can suddenly change from a losing nation to a winning. That reason being that if a nation is pushed to a corner so far enough that multiple Black Trigger users can appear and just instantly tide the changes, which is why nations do not like launching a full-out war to the point where it pushes to the nation to a brink of collapse.
They don't want to send all their defenses off.
Yeah, they don't want to send all their defenses off and immediately change the tides of war. They want to do what they call is capture. You don't know this much about it, but it's been briefly, almost very briefly explained. They want to get to the point where they're able to weaken the defenses enough in order to capture the mother trigger. That's the only way you can really win a war without, creating the enemy creating so many Black Triggers at once. So back to the main point. Yuichi Jin was a Black Trigger user, and his was completely different from, Kuga. It wasn't anything similar. His was a, how do you say this, more traditional styled, I guess, trigger, you would say. His was a sword that had 8 other blades on it.
Yeah, so those 8 blades, they weren't even like solid blades. They're like kind of like flames or ghost flames almost, right? I want to say.
Ghost blades that don't have real forms.
Yeah, but those things were pretty cool because I guess he was able to preset where those slashes would hit.
Yes.
Which I thought was amazing. I was like, dude, that is so cool. Plus with his, is it called a side effect? I almost called
side
it
effect.
A side effect. Sorry, Ruby's is called Semblance, which is basically a side effect. But yeah, so the side effect plus his side effect with that Black Trigger, I thought that was just kind of an unfair combo.
Yes. To be specific, his Black Trigger is called Fujin, and what Fujin is, it's a blade that functions as a normal blade, right? It's like it doesn't have any special function outside of the 8 blades where it's a normal sword, right? It can't change sizes, it can't do any other special function other than that. But the 8 blades that he has is kind of like a cartridge type thing where he's able to reload it, and 8 blades form. And so what these 8 blades are, they don't have any specific form. You're able to navigate it as if you're how do you say this? you're drawing a line essentially. Like you pull up MS Paint and you draw a line. That's what you're able to do with the blade, right? Those blades are able to go anywhere as long as you can see it. You can't you can't send a blade where you can't visualize it. So basically you have to visualize where the blade is going and it will happen. That's how the blade works. And so it goes any distance, by the way. It has no, as far as we know, it has no distant limit for the ghost blades, that is. And so that alone is pretty powerful, but at the same time, you can imagine it's pretty demanding in terms of your ability to use it, right? Because you have to imagine where the blade is going while you're actively in combat. So it's not just like, a newbie can pick it up and immediately be powerful. You have to be really, good at, active combat visualization. But Yuichi Jin has active combat experience. He was with the Border organization since the beginning, so he's seen a lot of combat. And then what else? He has a side effect. So in particular, if people have a certain amount of Treon that reaches a threshold, they gain what is called a side effect, right? So basically you have so much of this resources that it eventually gives you their side effect. And most side effects are kind of like enhanced abilities. They aren't necessarily like how do you say this? Like a random add-on or anything like that. And so Yuma Kuga, or Kuga Yuma's ability is he's able to detect lies. That's his side effect, right? And Yuichi Jin's is able to see the future, but it gets explained later on that it's not just as like being able to see perfectly what the future is like. He can only see vague things, and he can only see the future of someone in front of him, right? And each time he sees the future, it's not just like a perfect image of what is going on, what's going to happen next. It's kind of like all the possibilities of the futures that are going to happen, that could happen, that appear in front of him at once. And he has to figure out which one would be the correct one, or how he can manipulate it in order to keep the future that he wants in line. So it can go anywhere it can through any other influences by third parties, him or the enemy, or like the person he's seeing through their actions. So it's not as overpowered as you think it is, because he has to make it happen.
Right. So he could see possibilities A through Z, and if he wants only maybe A through G, he's got to narrow those down, and then he looks at those, and then he's like, oh, maybe I only want A through D, so he has to narrow it again. It's just really complicated, I would say.
And each of those let's say A through G, right? Suddenly it can go through A through J, because someone else did something unexpected out of his expectations.
Yeah, so it just keeps constantly changing, so it's keeping him on his toes at least.
Yeah. And so with this, we're also introduced with another major character in the story, which is Chika, Amatori Chika. What was your first impression of Chika? The small little girl?
Oh, okay. First, I was like, okay, it's just some girl. And then a little bit later, I'm like, okay, I'm looking at the animation. I don't know why, but the way they animated her mouth is so disturbing to me. It's just not normal. And it's consistent through the whole series, and I'm just like, if they come out with I think it was season 4 we're left with.
Yeah.
If they could come out with season 4 and actually animate her mouth like a normal person, I would be so much happier. But I was just like, oh my gosh, her mouth is just off-putting. Anyways, off that topic. For Chika, I would say in the beginning, I was just like, I didn't understand why she was there at first. I was just like, oh, maybe they just brought her in just cause. And then we got into season, or later in the season and stuff, and I'm like, okay. And then they revealed more about her, and it was funny. I think it's Replica is his name, right?
Yeah.
So Replica's like, here, let me scan to see how much Treon you have. And then, first they did Osamu, and I was like, oh, it's completely tiny. It's below average, because he's weak. He's known as he's a weak guy, so you expect it. But you expect Chika's to be even weaker because she's just this fragile little girl. And so they're like, here, let me scan. And it's like the size of a small planet. And I'm like, oh my god. I'm like, what the heck?
It's gargantuan.
It's like getting over 100% on a test. You're just like, it's ridiculous.
And
And then when
so,
she uses it,
yeah,
sorry, but when she uses it in combat, oh my gosh, it's hilarious. But we'll
it's
get to that
super
later.
funny. Yeah, we'll get to that in a bit. But so it turns out that Amatori Chika or Chika gets targeted by neighbors a lot, and we don't know exactly the reason why. And it isn't until when they measure her trionas that are like, ah, no wonder why she gets targeted a lot. She has a lot of trion, and they want it. And so, you know, through twists and turns, what's it called? It turns out that they're able to kind of figure out that also Chica also has a side effect, which is to be expected because she has so much freaking Treon, is that she's able to detect when neighbors are about to come within her vicinity, which is, pretty, interesting if you think about it. She only has an instinct about it. She doesn't know exactly, like,
She could
uh,
just sense it.
yeah, she just senses it. It's not exactly clear, cut and clear.
I have a quick question.
I'll go ahead.
So that means before like her and Yuma actually met, she sensed him like
Yes.
showing up, right? Right.
Yeah, she actually sensed Yuma.
Okay, because that's what I was wondering. Because yeah, once you figure out he's a neighbor and her side effect, I was like, In my head, I'm like, was she able to sense Yuma when he showed up?
I think she only
Or-
sensed him by like the fact that like he was a neighbor, but not necessarily hostile. Because I think she's more sensitive to hostile reactions, because that's what she's been with her whole life. But
Right.
Kugo wasn't hostile at all. He was just riding a bike, or well, attempting to ride a bike rather.
Yes.
But because he was friendly, Shika actually never suspected that Kugo was a neighbor.
Right. She just sensed that there was a neighbor, but she didn't know it was him.
Yeah, I don't think it even went off that he was a neighbor. Like even the sensors went off because he wasn't hostile at all. So I think it has to be a hostile neighbor attack in order for her to sense it fully.
Okay. That would make
But moving on, basically Jin secures Kuga's position to be inside the border organization, and Kuga won't be touched, right? And Osamu was like, you know what? I need to make a squad in order to, get sent away to the away squads, because it's revealed indirectly that to Osamu that there's an away squad that happens. So they thought that wasn't possible, by the way. They thought it was only a one-way thing where neighbors come and invade people, the people of Earth. Turns out that Border has enough technology to go send through their own, troops or squads to go through other planetary expeditions, right? And it turns out there was an away expedition squad, and so Osamu figures that out, and it's like, oh, that's gonna be my goal, to go into like to get into the away squad and look for Chico's brother, because it turns out Chico's brother went missing. He went
her
to
friend. And her friend.
and her friend, yeah. So wow, you actually remember that.
Yep.
I actually completely forgot about that. Yeah, her friend also went missing because they were kidnapped. She was kidnapped by a neighbor, and then her brother, Chica's brother, went through the wormhole to go through the other side, and he disappeared and was never heard from again. So Otsuma has that goal. But Kuga didn't really have any motivation to stay in Earth anymore, because it turns out the person that he was looking for is dead in the border organization. And the reason why he even came looking for, came through Earth to go through the border organization is because his father died, right?
And his father told him to go search for him, right?
Yeah, search for the man to help Kuga specifically. But the father didn't expect anything else out of that. And so his father died and gave Kuga the black trigger. Basically, his father sacrificed himself in order to keep Kuga alive, because Kuga did something stupid and got himself killed, essentially. And he's barely alive, and his body was swapped out for Trion, essentially, keeping him alive. And so Kuga was trying to basically reverse engineer that process in order to bring back his father, right? He wants to bring back his father because he doesn't care about living, to be honest. He doesn't have a goal. He kind of felt empty after his father was gone. And so he was basically like, screw life, I'm gonna try and bring my father back. But now he can't do that because the person that his father told him to look for, just like, in order for that person to give Kuga protection, is gone. And he thought that that person who could give him protection would, basically introduce him to engineers in order to reverse engineer his trigger, in order to, for him to die and, his father come back. That's all he cared about. But now that that plan's got to bust, he's like, well, I'm probably gonna leave, right? And so, Jin and Rindo, basically. And Rindo is the branch manager of Tamakoma branch, right? So Border is split into 3 branches. Gosh, there's so much explanation. Border is split into 3 branches, right? There's the Tamakuma branch. There's the gosh, I'm forgetting the name of the Border organization. Give me a moment. There's basically 3 branches, and each branches have their own specific like unique cases. Oh, Suzunari branches, and then the and there's one more branch I'm forgetting, but anyways, each branch has their own unique characteristics. And so Tamakoma branch is basically like, let's get along with neighbors. We don't believe all neighbors are bad. I think Suzunari branch is like they don't really care about neighbors. They just only care about protecting the the people. So they're neutral about neighbors, right? They just only care about the fact that they're invading, they need to protect. And then the 3rd branch is like the main branch. They're basically saying all neighbors are enemies.
The Karens of the world.
I guess you could say that, yeah. And so, Tamakoma branch is like, the branch that obviously Osama is going to enter with Kuga because, they're friendly to neighbors. And so Jin is part of that branch, and a few other people are part of that branch. And it turns out that, what was it? Rindo is like, hey, why don't you try and convince the branch director Rindo, Takumi Rindo, is like, hey, why don't you try and convince Kuga to stay, right? It would be a shame if he went. Not because, he's a powerful asset or anything. It's just that he feels bad for Kuga because he's an acquaintance of his, he's acquaintance of his son or whatever. He's the son of his acquaintance, right? Or a friend, really close friend. And so Osamu manages to convince Kuga by saying, hey, why don't you help us get to like the away squad, right? Basically join my squad, help me and Chika. Chika decides to join, by the way, the squad and Border organization, in order to get to the away squad so we can go and look for her brother and her friend. And Kuga's like, you know what? I'm amused by this idea. Let's stay, right? And plus, Kuga really likes Osamu, and like, not in like a romantic way. He just really likes he likes being around Osamu because Osamu is basically what's it called? Foolishly honest.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And so like he doesn't like deceitful people or anything like that. So that's why he gets along with Osamu so well. And so they decide to form the Mikumo squad or the Tamakoma squad. Tamakoma second squad. And so, they go through, a lot of trials and, that. So I guess we could talk about, like, the first impressions of really Chika. Because we always knew Kuga was capable. Like, he was capable of combat because, it's clear that he was a battle-hardened person. Right. But Chika was unknown, right? Because we only knew she had a large amount of Trion. And so here comes, like, the day they enter for, like, the test, right? Mm-hmm. And Chika's up to demonstrate a sniper. And so there's like, they also explain there's 3 different types of snipers. There's the standard sniper, kind of like a, all-rounder sniper. Has good speed, has good damage, good penetration, There's also a light sniper, really fast speed, low penetration, and can be blocked by, weak shields or anything like that. And then there's the heavy sniper. And so, this heavy sniper, it's called Ibis. And basically, anyone could use it, but it basically uses a larger amount of Trion that has a heavier firepower, slower bullet speed, but basically pretty heavy firepower, which could break through like walls pretty easily, right? That's what it was intended for, right? And so, for some reason, the person there, a funny man, by the way, you know him very well. His name is Ken Satori. He's known as the Twin Sniper.
Yes, I do remember him very well.
Yeah, his tagline is, "Did you see my twin snipe?"
Yep. Anytime he gets one, he's like, "Did you see that? Did you see my twin snipe?"
Yes, he's very eager for praise. And basically, his twin snipe is using 2 of the standard snipers, which is called Igre. He uses 2 of those at once and he shoots them, which is actually pretty impressive if you think about it. He's using both eyes, both scopes, and both hands to shoot. That's pretty impressive if you think about it. But it's kind of passed off as a joke because of the way he acts.
Yeah.
But he's impressive in his own right. He's an A rank sniper, and we'll talk about ranks in a bit. But basically, he selects Chica to fire the Ibis, right? He has two other people fire the what's called the Egret and the Lightning. Lightning being the fast bullet type weak gun, and the Egret being the standard. And Ibis comes in, and so he chooses Chica out of all people, right? And it's kind of amusing because the Ibis is basically bigger than Chica.
Yep.
And so I want you to talk about the moment you fired and what you thought.
Okay, so yeah. So he was like, hey, Chica, come here and demonstrate how to fire this rifle for us. And she's like, me? Like, she's really scared because, you know, she's not much of a combat person. So she's like, okay, hesitantly coming up. And she's like getting ready to fire at the little target down the firing range. And she pulls the trigger. And it's like a giant, just like a literal like laser beam just shoots out. Kind of like if you played Super Smash, you know, the Samus Ultimate.
Yeah.
It's like one of those just shooting out, and it just blows a hole through like the thick wall of their facility. And she's like, "Oh my god, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." And then he's like, "Whoa." He's like, I'll take blame for that, but holy crap, like they weren't expecting her to blow through the wall." It was just amazing because she had so much Treon. It was basically like just shooting a nuke.
Yeah, it turned from a regular cannon into a Gauss cannon, essentially. That's what happened in her hands.
It
And
was
then
great.
we later see other people using the Ibis, and the firepower is much less powerful than, you know, compared to Chica. Which is funny, you know. We didn't see a we never saw a user using Ibis until way later. Like, way later.
Yeah, when you see the comparison, you're just like, dude, that's pathetic. Get the Chica's level, man. It's just like ridiculous.
And so, what's interesting is that prior to their entry of their, you know, entry through the squad, or through their, like, you know, introduction to Border, entering Border as a as a unit, is that they've had mentors, right? And I think you particularly like all of these mentors. And so there was another squad residing at the Tamakoma branch, and they were the first squad, right? Named the Kizaki squad. And so there are 3 people in that squad, and they're considered one of the most powerful what's it called? The most powerful squad ever in the Border organization, right? But they aren't officially in the rankings, which we'll talk about in a bit again. And so their names is Reiji Kizaki, Kirie Kunemi, and Kyosuke Karasuma, right? And to give you like a, you know, a brief rundown of them, because you kind of probably won't remember. Kizaki's the all-rounder, the big muscly dude.
Right, yeah.
And then Konami is the girl who gets deceived easily.
Yep.
And then Karasuma's the one who's kind of like straight-faced, but also like tells the most ridiculous shit at, you know, times.
Yeah. It's like the perfect trio, man.
Yeah,
It's
the
like-
perfect trio, essentially. And so, what was your Kizaki? What was your impression of Kizaki at first?
Not gonna lie, I already forgot the names of them. I just know by like if I
The
see
big,
him.
muscly dude.
Okay, so that guy, I thought he was gonna be just like kind of just like a tank. He's just gonna go in there and just kind of like Brick in Borderlands. He's just gonna punch everything because he's this massive dude. So I thought he was just gonna like walk in and go, I punch it, and you know, like one punch everything. And turns out he uses what, like a minigun or something, or Gatling gun or something.
Gatling gun, but it turns out he has expertise with everything. He's also he was also a sniper before.
Right. So yeah, he was the all-arounder. But when I saw his Gatling gun, I'm like, that is just so fitting. Like, it's just this big dude just carrying a massive gun. It's like Schwarzenegger carrying, you know, a shotgun. It's just fitting. It just
and it also turns out he does the brick move. I punch him.
Yes, he does, which is great with the trigger. Oh, that's everything about it.
Yeah, you loved him especially for that because he does the I punch him in a battlefield of swords, you know, guns, bullets flying, you know, magical bullets.
I brought a fist to a gunfight.
And I'm strong with it. And moving on to Konami, you saw she was unique, I think.
Yeah, in the beginning, I thought she was a little bit kind of annoying, but then after, you know, you give it some time, she's just like the most gullible thing ever, and it's hilarious.
Yeah.
And she's kind of like, she thinks she's better than everyone, which is even funnier.
And she does have the skills to back it up. That's the thing.
She does, but like whenever, because they have to. You said they were mentors, right? So
Yeah.
they're mentoring the second squad. So when they were fighting, or because she's mentors to Yuma,
Yeah.
and so they were fighting, and whenever she lost one, she's like, "Oh, I should have won all the fights," and Yuma's like, "I got one." He's like, "I finally got one."
Because she's like, I can't believe I lost one to this little shrimp.
Yeah, like I lost to this really low rank dude. I'm like the highest rank, or not the highest, but like one of the best. How did I lose? And the Yuma's like, "Dude, guys, I got it."
Yeah. And so to give a little bit tidbit, she's actually the number 3 attacker in the entire border organization, which means a lot. She's rank 3 out of all the entire attackers. There's only 2 other people who are better than her. Which is crazy if you think about it.
Yeah, considering there's like hundreds of.
Yeah, hundreds of people. And there's cracked people in the organization. Like, it's revealed that there's so many, like, specialized people and, like, so many powerful people in the organization. So to be rank 3 amongst all of them is impressive. And you start to see why. She's basically combat, like, trained a lot. Like, not even trained. Like, she's combat experienced for a long time. And she has a unique trigger where she has a dual wield, like, dagger that transforms into a giant axe.
Yes, I thought that was great. Because yeah, she's more like speed, I want to say.
Speed, yeah.
Yeah, so she's really quick. So the double dagger, of course, it makes sense. But then when they first introduced when she just combined them to make a massive axe, I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, for more firepower.
Yeah, I was just like, oh my gosh, that's actually pretty cool that she could do that. But it also makes sense.
Yeah. And then there's Karasuma, Kyosuke Karasuma, the straight-faced man who likes to joke a lot while being straight-faced. He's the mentor of Osamu, right? I forgot to mention Kizaki, the big muscly dude, is the mentor of Chika for a reason. Karasuma mentors Osamu, and Karasuma's kind of like, I guess, normal in that way. He doesn't do any like rigorous training, or he doesn't do anything, but he tries adjusting to Osamu and like try helping him in the way he can as much as possible, which is really respectable of him, right? Because Osamu has changed, or like kind of like in a way demands a lot from Kyosuke or Karasuma, because Osama out of the other 2 people that are in his squad is really lacking. He has no firepower, he's not really battle experienced, and so he tries, like, he demands a lot in order to make up for like his weaknesses, right? And
Right.
Karasuma's there to help him, and he really does help a lot. He explains a lot of things. He basically gives a lot of tips to Osamu in order to give him the push that he needs. But it's revealed that despite him being the most normal one out of the 3 mentors, he's also impressive in his own right. What did you think when he first revealed his ability? It was the Geist mode. Remember, he shifts.
Geist mode. I don't remember Geist.
It's when he goes into what's called a Geist mode. He goes on a 3-minute timer, and then like his arm physically changes. His arms and legs changes. Do you remember that?
I actually don't remember that.
Okay, so basically, Karasuma has a ability where his trigger ability is that he can shift Trion, like the actual Trion composition, to like wherever parts of his body that he wants, right? And so in this particular, the first time he showed it, he shifted it to his legs and one arm to give firepower to both his legs and arms. So he basically can go super fast and go, hit hard, right? But unfortunately, he gets bested because the opponent that he goes on about is really strong. So he doesn't get to show much about it, right? It isn't until later that he shows another shift where he brings a laser gun. Do you remember that?
I don't. What in the world? I don't
I'm gonna
remember
have to show you
that.
later. But basically he's able to relocate his Trion in order to make use of it somewhere else. That's basically his Trion. And he's an all-rounder, which is why he doesn't seem that impressive compared to Kizaki. Because he's more of a neutral all-rounder, to be honest. Like, he's a very neutral one compared to Kizaki. So I get why he's the least impressionable one, because out of all the other 3, the other 2, he's had the least amount of combat. By the way, it's actually
That's,
he legitimately has the least amount of combat, which is why you don't get that much of an impression of him. But he's a respectable, attacker, all-rounder attacker himself. So moving on from the mentors, and really speeding things up, we're gonna go with like the overall. I guess we'll introduce the last character, in a bit, or we'll talk about ranks first, and then we'll introduce the last character that we need to, and then wrap it up, I guess. And so, rankings. So Border has rankings within their organization in order to distinguish people who are people's abilities, right? So there's C rank, basically the trainees. C ranks are all trainees, right? They don't get and with that rank, you get training triggers, right? Basically, standard triggers, but less functions, because each trigger has their own special functions. But within the standardizations of the border organization, but trainers don't get access to that because what they're training, you don't get all the fun at once. And B rank is when you start getting access to the actual functions of each trigger, and more specialized triggers coming through that. And B rank is like where quite a few people exist. And then there's A rank, which is like the top rankers, who are pretty strong in their own right. There's only about I think there was only about 30 people in A rank. So there's 30 people in A rank, and then there's like 50 people in B rank, and then 400 people in like C rank. That was I think our official number. It might have been 100 people in B rank, now that I think about it, and 50 people in A rank, sorry. But that was like the official number when they first joined and first explained the border organization. And then there's S rank. And S ranks are only specifically for people who have the black trigger. And there's a reason why they need to be S rank, is because they're so strong that they need to be ranked S rank. They don't exist within the rankings because it'd be unfair for them to take part in what's called the ranking wars. And so once you get out of C rank, right? So C ranks, in order to rank up to B rank, you would have to do solo wars against each other, or do basically training missions in order to gain points, right? After you gain a certain amount of points in the threshold, you move on to the next rank. That's how it works generally. And so B ranks is where group rank wars happen. And so you move up as a group, no matter what. And so your individual rank doesn't matter within the B ranks. As long as you're within that squad, you can move up to A rank. As long as your squad, beats other squad. And so there's multiple different squads fighting at once in a training field, essentially. Simulated battlefield. So the border organization has simulated battlefields that you're able to go without and fight each other without any real harm. And so B rank is where a lot of the action happens in the story. And then A rank is special. We've never seen an A rank war happen before. But yeah, that's how you basically go up, is by fighting each other, groups fighting each other in order to get higher ranks. That's basically it. It's as simple as that. And so with that, we're going to introduce the last character that ends up joining the Tamakoma squad, the Mikomo squad, and his name is Hughes. Do you remember Hughes?
I do remember Hughes. I do remember him. He was unique.
Yes, he was very unique in another way. And so, in order to TLDR this, Hughes was a prisoner from the aftermath of the war that happens in the story. I'm not gonna explain all of it, but basically he was the enemy, but turns out he's more neutral, to be honest. He doesn't really have strong feelings about his country outside of one particular person. But he basically comes into agreement with Mikumo, or Osama, the main character, that he will help the Osama squad get to the rank that they need to be in order to be selected for the away squad. And as long as he gets back to his home country, he'll help them up into there. That was his agreement. But turns out you can kind of tell that he becomes attached with them, especially with the character named Yotaro, this little child that resides in Tamakoma branch, who rides, which is your favorite character, by the way, Raijin Maru, the capybara.
Yes, the capybara. The capybara, the goat of the whole thing.
Fun fact, by the way, side note, Raijin Maru is the most popular entity, or people who belong to the border organization in Border. Raijin Maru is the most popular by far. Everyone loves Raijin Maru in that organization, which is interesting. It's a tidbit that's never said in the anime. It's in the side books, like the collection lore that was released by the the creator of World Trigger. But yeah, fun fact. But Hughes ends up joining, right? And he becomes attached to Yotaro. He really gets along with Yotaro, even though Yotaro is a childless one. It's really the reason. Yotaro is the real reason why Hughes actually agrees to cooperate with them. And I remember when Hughes found out that he was basically abandoned. Didn't you get chills when he got angry?
Little bit, yeah. Kind of sent a chill down your spine.
Yeah, he got angry, and then he finally agrees to join the squad. And turns out Hughes is really, he's really cool. What did you think about him when he was like, showed his capability as in terms of a border organization?
Oh, it was hilarious. He's like, "Oh, I gotta get to B rank to be in your squad." Okay, he basically said, "Okay, hold my beer," and he just destroyed everyone. Like, not a challenge. And then he, I think it was the A ranks were
Yeah.
like, "Hey, I want to fight him," and he was, pretty good. He lost, of course, but he was just like, "Oh, so I'm ranked around here, maybe."
Yeah,
And he's
he
just
was
like,
ranked between the number 1 and number 7.
yeah,
Or-
just
yeah.
starting out.
Yeah, and plus he was using a training trigger. Remember, he went immediately into the ranking wars with a training trigger.
Yes, he did. I thought that was hilarious.
And so, yeah, it was pretty cool to see his capabilities. And remember, he isn't even a sword user initially, he's not really a sword user. He had a specialized trigger, which did unique things. But he was taught sword master, like how to use a sword by one of the best sword masters, who I guess in the future, if we ever come back to this, we'll talk about. But yeah, Hughes was a very interesting character. So, to go overall, I guess, what did you think about World Trigger overall, and like how did you come to enjoy it, and what was unexpected about it that in any way, what was there anything unexpected about it?
Overall, I want to say World Trigger, great anime. I'm waiting for season 4 with Jin. Just, hoping it shows up someday in our lifetime. I guess unexpected was, I guess, the story for me. I was just, it was different for me. But I kind of understood it because it was very kind of closely related to like how Ruby is. And then what was your third question?
And my third question was, what was it called?
Technically your second question, but
Yeah. Oh gosh, I'm forgetting the second question just because I forgot about it. But I think the second question was, you know what? I'll just come up with a new question right now. It's that,
Sure.
during the times that, during the time you watched it, right? Was there a point in time where you were like, wow, this is an anime that like, was there a point in time where you're like, wow, this is an anime where like, it almost doesn't feel like an anime. It feels like an actual storytelling, like, thing where you're actually like witnessing an actual story happening rather than just like, simple anime antics happening.
Yeah, I want to say once you get through like the beginning, but before the
war.
No, not the I guess maybe during the war, but those random episodes of just filler, like forget about those. But I want to say around there, I was like, wow, this is more of a story than an anime to me. I was just like, it was, because usually if it's anime, it's just all action or something like, I don't really get it. I don't understand those. It's just like, okay, kind of same action, different characters, different world, just different name, It's all kind of the same. But this one was like actually storytelling more than action. I did appreciate that more. That it was story.
And to add on to that, it's not like there was like, almost no action. There was plentiful of action. There was a lot of action overall, but it balanced it well to the point where there was both storytelling and action.
Yes, I agree.
So
it wasn't all like every episode had a fight in it. It was kind of casual for some of them. Then you get a fight or a couple fights throughout episodes, or like the war took quite a few episodes, but then it calmed down, and it was a good balance.
Yeah, it was definitely a good balance in my opinion. And so overall, what would you rate the anime / series out of 10?
I believe I gave it at least an 8.5 to a 9.
You gave it an 8.5, I remember.
8.5.
Which is a very high rating for those who got to this point in time of listening to this. 8.5 is very high for Saki because he has very high standards. For me, it was a 9 just because I love the story. I'm more of a lenient, type of guy. But it was very surprising that the very first anime I ever introduced to him got the high rating, and it kind of screwed up for the future animes that we can talk about and we're watching right now. because the standard is so high for his expectations after World Trigger.
I also want to say I would have given it a 9 if they just animated Chica's mouth normally. Like, honestly, come on, it's not that hard. You did, hundreds, or not hundreds, but couple dozen other characters. Can't you do hers too?
Yeah. So that concludes our talk with World Trigger. I know, like, we basically sped through, like, in terms of characters and everything, but this would have taken like 5 episodes at least. Don't you think so? Because if we talk about every little aspect.
Oh, if it was like every aspect, like maybe 5 to 10
Yeah,
episodes.
and that's no fun. We're not gonna, constantly make episodes just about that. But we may revisit in the future of like the subject of World Trigger through other means. But for now, we'll leave it here. Next episode, we'll resume our normal, schedule in terms of like the normal topics and everything. But for now, we'll end it here. So I'll end it off. So I'm Jin.
And I'm Saki.
And this is A Casualist, and we'll see you next week. Bye bye.